to come today and to present a short presentation, just a few pictures and a few slides about Karbala and about Ashura. Most of us are familiar, but not everybody is familiar with Ashura. Not everybody understands the background to Ashura and the background to Karbala. So I'll give a little history, and it's so beautiful here. Oftentimes people say in Islam there is no art, but we see here beautiful depictions of Imam Hussain and Imam Ali all across the whole of the country and all across in the Middle East. So many depictions, and people say we don't see this at all in Sunni Islam, is it? But we see in Iraq here many different pictures, and this is just one of them. So this is the background to the Shia personalities and the events. So we know about the Hijrah, and we know of the death of Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the caliphate of Ali in 655, and then the assassination of Ali, and the martyrdom of Imam Hussain in 680. So that puts it into a context of when he was died and what the moment that his martyrdom had taken place, long after the death of his grandfather and long after the assassination of his father. So that kind of gives us we're talking about the 7th century, and then this is the kind of, for Christians in that sense, it is kind of the 7th century, and particularly 680 when it took place. And this is a picture of Iraq, and most of us are familiar, but not everybody is familiar. See Karbala right on the bank of the Euphrates River, north of Najaf and north of Nasriya and Basra. And they are right on the bank of the Euphrates. So important that it took place there on that particular river when they came to stop and made their camp, and which is remembered during Ashura and during Muharram. This is a picture that was taken in 2007. So it was we see now how popular Ashura has become and how many people come to Iraq every year and come to Karbala every year during Ashura and take part. Over 4 million people gathered, probably one of the largest meeting of humanity in the world now, even more than Hajj when we think of the whole of Muharram and people gathering right throughout Arbaeen. It continues a whole movement of people, of many hundreds of thousands of people gathering at the Imam Hussain shrine on the eve of Ashura. And here we see all that's associated with them, the banners and the music and the marching and the parade and all that takes place around it at Ashura in Iraq. This is what I went to visit last year, and some of you know Mustafa and Sayyid Mahdi from the guardian of the shrine in Iraq as well. So we had a beautiful visit there last February at it as well. And this is inside the shrine, just at the very depiction, and it was a beautiful experience just to move inside the shrine and to be able to, as a Christian, to be welcomed into the shrine and to meet people there and to take part in the conference. This is one other doctor who came from America for the conference who took place at that particular time. So it was a lovely occasion and a wonderful opportunity to be present at the shrine and to visit the shrine and to see the shrine and to experience the hospitality of all the people who organized that particular conference and to take part in the conference, which was broadcast on television. And this is part of the Karbala TV crew, and they're very busy during the time of Ashura. It's their busiest time throughout the year. They have so many outside broadcasting crews and they visit so many places, and they're so busy kind of promoting Ashura right throughout the whole of the month of Muharram. They are constantly working 24 hours, and they are based at the shrine. They broadcast to the whole world. And this is Najaf, a beautiful picture. I like it very much at the shrine of Imam Ali in Najaf, and kind of just there with some of the shrine leaders and Mustafa as well. It was a beautiful evening, and we gathered there and they welcomed us, and it was a lovely occasion to visit the shrine. And the official photographer took the photographs of us, and he later gave us all a copy of the, and we can see how beautiful the shrine is. For people who haven't seen or haven't been so close to the shrine in Najaf, the beautiful gold doors and the beautiful gold dome and the beautiful gold spires, all very ornate and very beautiful at the time as well. This is in Babylon University, the University of Babel. And it was interesting that in 2004, there were only 4,000 students in Babel University. And when we went there last year, there were over 20,000 students. So more than 5 times the number of students have entered the university, and they're building and expanding the whole time. So they welcomed us there and received us and gave us a celebration. So most of us are familiar with the Ashura liturgy, as we call it, and the Ashura processions and the Ashura that takes place. It's a morning liturgy, a majlis, and people remember the whole history and the tragedy of Ashura, and they live that and they remember that. And one thing that I've been saying, it's a tremendous consolation to cry and to feel the grief of the family of Hussain, and to remember the death and the martyrdom of all the members of his family, and to relive that and to remember that, and it's as if it's almost present again. And this story has embedded into our consciousness, and it's become a very real program for people every year, and it nourishes the faith of Shia all across the world as they remember this tragic event and touch into their own sense of loss. And one thing that I have to say, many Shia have encountered great difficulty in their own life, and particularly Iraqis have suffered the death of their brothers and sisters, and many have suffered the death of terrorism and different attacks. And so it's very important to have this cathartic moment in the year to cry and to remember with grief the death of Imam Hussain, but we're also remembering our own grief, the death of our own loved ones, those who lost their lives through violence throughout the year. And people gather across the world, also in the UK, and they remember with great affection, and they feel deeply the loss of Imam Hussain, as they feel deeply the loss of their own relatives, and experiencing their own grief and their own loss and their own tragedy in their own lives. And this is the northern part and part of it as well, where people will see it. This one is taking place in Iraq as well, but there are other forms of this Batam that have taken place right across the world. And you know, people are very familiar with the beautiful songs that are a part of the nights and the remembering and gathering together. O bearer of the battle standard, O Hussain, son of Ali, O Ali, Karbala, la ilaha illa Allah. Karbala, no God is there save God, and the meaning of Karbala. And when people gather together, these chants have become written down, and people remember them and memorize them, and they continue to recall the story of Muharram, and they continue to recall the story of Ashura. Every night people remember the death and the martyrdom of Imam Ali and Imam Hussain and all his brothers and his family and his wife and his children, all who are associated with it as well. So this also takes place in the UK, and people see it in smaller forms as well. And some people, this is only one aspect of it, of course, but we shouldn't concentrate on the flagellation aspect of it, but really it's just, for so many people, they kind of see these pictures and they wonder about it as well. And this took place in Manchester. And this is taking place in London during the Ashura procession, which takes place on Marble, right from up to Marble Arch. And they gather, they bring a beautiful depiction of the shrine, and they carry this with them on their procession. And this is here at Marble Arch in London as well, where they gather together and they have do their Ashura practices. And it's a big occasion for Muslims in the UK to gather together and to do this together. So we're part of a community that's very large. It's small in Ireland, but across the world it's taking place in different communities in all the cities of the world. Practically every major city in the world it's taking place. And they have these processions, and they have the waving of the black flags, and they have the kind of engaging in the program and the remembering of the martyrdom of Imam Hussain, and committing themselves to kind of working harder and harder in their community and to bringing about peace and reconciliation in their community. So this is another one again at Manchester in Matam, we can see it taking place. And this is a picture that took place from the front of the book that I wrote. It's one like this in London as well, on the march from Notting Hill to Marble Arch. And afterwards, plenty of nice food and nice laham mashwi and humus and dajaj and samak and all the ham. And This is what I want to talk about as well. So many people are talking about the Arab Spring as if it is kind of something that has happened just in the last 5 years. We know about what happened in Libya, we know what happened in Egypt, we know what's happening now in Syria, and people are talking about that this Arab revolution is taking place for the first time. But people are saying the Arab Spring as if the Arabs have woken up today. What I'm saying that this isn't something that began today at all. It has begun many years ago. The whole notion of this revolution, which is both a religious revolution and which is both a kind of a spiritual revolution and a democratic revolution and a whole democratic revival, is something that has been at the heart of Shia Islam right back to Imam Hussain. And I talk about this as kind of beginning from Baghdad to Karbala. So it has been a journey not only of religious importance but also of political importance, and it is this revolution that has taken place not only in Iraq but also in Iran that has been taking place many years, has been motivated and has been inspired by the life of Imam Hussain and by his particular commitment not only to religious ideals but also to political ideals and to serving that. And we see so many people here exercising freedom in Iraq now the first time, particularly in the south and the Shia areas, where before it wasn't possible to celebrate Ashura and Muharram during the time of Saddam. And now people are free to do that, and they're free to express them, and they're free to curse their own government if they want to. Before, you can't curse Saddam or else maybe you will end up in prison. But now, so this movement of religious freedom and democratic freedom has been taking place in Iraq, even though it was at a very big price, and it came at the cost of occupation on the American occupation. But yet it was the first movement towards democracy that had taken place in that part of the world. So in a sense, this is where the Arab Spring began, and this is where the commitment towards democracy began in the Middle East. It began in Iraq, but even before that it began in Iran. Even when we think about Ashura, and we think about the revolution that began in 1979 in Iran, and we think about the role of Imam Khomeini and all that took place around the motivation to inspire a revolutionary approach to political life and kind of the establishment of an Islamic government and the recovery of democratic ideals. This was taking place in Iran and has continued to take place in recent times as well. We see the Green Movement is taking place, and all the whole movement towards a greater democracy has been inspired by within Shiism going back many years and for many times. And this is something that we need to be conscious of, because in many days people think that the Arab Spring has only begun in maybe the last 5 years. But back to 1979, there was a real movement towards democracy, there was a real movement towards religious pluralism, there was a real movement towards expression of freedom and political freedom, and this was taking place, and putting aside tyranny and putting aside dictatorship all right across the Middle East. So in a sense, it hasn't begun with Libya, or hasn't begun with Mubarak in Egypt, but it is going back many tens of years, or right back to Imam Hussain. So this is the picture of Baghdad during the occupation, and so much destruction and so much horror and so much loss and so much struggle had taken place during that it was a tremendous tragedy and a tremendous loss for many people, and so many people suffered during that occupation, and so many people suffered during that war, and it increased sectarianism and it increased violence. But yet, I think in the end, peace will win out. Even though there is sectarianism at the moment, and even though there is violence, there is still a commitment to government, and there is still a commitment to transparency, and there is still a commitment to defeat terrorism and to defeat violence. Many people were displaced, and many people had to leave their home. Over 4 million people in Iraq at that particular time were left, and because of the violence and because of the sectarian war, had to move to other parts in Syria and had to move to other parts in the UK and Ireland. But now we see a gradual moving back, and maybe the rebuilding of society that is taking place as well. And we see that in the future, maybe the leadership within the Shia community will continue to direct towards greater tolerance and greater peace. And our hope and our belief is that there will be a genuine, transparent, inclusive democracy in Iraq and in the Middle East. So the Arab Spring, which had its roots in Karbala and had its fruits in Iran and had its fruits in Iraq, is gradually taking place, and with Sistani and with people that are taking all the Sadr community that is taking place. We believe that in fact democracy will really take root in the Middle East and will spread right across, and the time for tyranny and the time for dictatorship is over. So we see here kind of this, I like this picture, just stepping out, somebody looking out behind Imam Ali and then trying to, Muqtada al-Sadr in the background looking on, but at the same time, the people beginning tentatively into a new future. So it isn't a future only for Iraq, but it is a future that is important for the whole of the Middle East, right across Syria, Bahrain, Lebanon, right across the whole country, all of the countries that are taking place, Saudi Arabia and all of the other countries. There's a real revolution is taking place that is bringing around more freedom in democracy, more participation in democracy, more transparency in government, no to dictatorship, no to tyranny, no to violence, and an opening up of political participation and opening up of kind of freedom for all people. So this is something that we need to be very proud of within the Shia community when people think of it, that this commitment towards democracy is not something that began with the Arab Spring, but it's something that has been there from the very heart of Islam, and at the very start of Islam is taking place right with Imam Hussain. And we see here kind of the background to both the terror of the war and still some of the backgrounds that are taking place. And George W. Bush, I don't know who will write the history of George W. Bush in Iraq, but it will take many years before people start to understand what really happened and whether it was a blessing or a curse, or whether in fact it had opened things up. But at least with government things are taking place. So thank you very much, and at least so the Arab Spring is alive and well in Iraq and in Iran, and it has its heart in the Shia community, so and it has its heart with Imam Hussain. Thank you very much.